Hi there, and I'm glad you make time to join us on AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. I am Ajaman Ochredakom, and I promise that, and this episode promises to be a good one as usual as you watch AAU Talks as we inform to transform. We're looking at leadership challenges in African higher education. You'll bear with me that leadership takes a great chunk of whatever that we do, and our progress, our greatness, our failure, and everything that we do all boils down on good leadership. And interestingly, people believe, or let's say the school of thought, that leadership is all about the personal attribute of people who govern. So if you are governing, if you are leading, your attributes all encapsulate to make you who leader is. However, another school of thought believes that leadership goes beyond your personal attributes, but rather how efficient the quality of the result you bring on the table as a leader makes a difference, and not just your personal attributes. But you know what? We have one of the biggest names, or let's say one of the leadership academic mentors in Africa with us in the studio to help us understand a lot more about leadership, and also what is the right path to pick on these two leadership thoughts. So don't go anywhere. We'll go for a short break. When we come back, I'll let you know who this leadership mentor is, and then we'll zoom right into discussion. Stay with us. You're welcome back to AAU Talks on AAU TV. My name is Ajamal Chodako, and I'm glad you made time to join me because today we're looking at leadership challenges in African higher education. And before we went on a break, I was telling you about who our guest for today is. Now, he served as the foundation registrar for the University of Development Studies. He also joined as the executive secretary for the National Council for Tertiary Education, and now currently he serves as the president for the Radford University College, in the person of Dr. PaulEffah. Doc, you're welcome to AAU Talks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ajuman, for having me on your program.
Your inspiration and your love for leadership is so overwhelming, and we couldn't find anyone else by you to have a discussion with, to delve deep into leadership and what leadership style we need for our continent. But let's see, you've been doing a lot more. Even though you're serving as president for Radford, you're also running some leadership trainings. How's it been so far?
Thank you once again. It's been humbling to hear the comments, the compliments. I have been in higher education throughout my academic career, from the University of Ghana through to UDS, back to Radford University, all about higher education. And since retiring from active service, I have taken some time also to mentor the young and upcoming, as well as old people in academia. As you rightly pointed out, I've been talking to vice chancellors, talking to university councils, and talking to university administrators all over on the continent, Ghana, and West Africa, and Africa in general.
Great. So, but over 3 decades of making strides in higher education and leadership / governance. Let's begin with leadership as a term that people really find so complex to define. I know you mentioned in one of your books that we have so many definitions of leadership, over 850 definitions. So we can't break them all down. But in your perspective, what is leadership to the layman? And what are some of the features that we should know of?
Leadership is a very complex topic. But in general, we would say that it is the one who envisions and crafts strategy to achieve that vision. Is the one who empowers, the one who influences, people who follow them. you inspire. If you are a leader, you ought to be able to inspire others, chart a path, and get people to follow the path. So that's what leadership is about.
Great. No, with the inspiration that you mentioned in leadership, are all other leadership features bearing that inspirational aspect, or some perhaps don't really see the need for inspiration? I mean, some crack the whip. We have those who really want to also begin by culminating, drawing minds together. Take us to some of the features and let's see how we can identify inspiration through them.
If you don't inspire, you are not a leader. You're going to get people to follow you. You would turn ordinary people into extraordinary people. You are going to get many more leaders and not just followers. So if you are not inspiring enthusiasm, you are not going to get there. You could be described as a leader, and yet in reality you are a boss, someone who inspires fear. People fear you. Under you, they cannot work freely. But under the leader, you should have some joy working with the leader, as opposed to the one who inspires fear. You are going to the leader and you are afraid. How are you going to get this person to do the work that you want them to do? So you set direction. You are going this way. They could be tired on their way, but you ought to be able to influence them positively. You should be able to inspire them, to get them. They should be happy working under you. Somebody says that when you sleep and you work really with a good leader, your thoughts go to the fact that you want the night to be short, so that you can get to work early and to be working with this type of person. That is the kind of person we are talking about, because you can have positive influence and you can have negative influence. But we are talking about the one who would have positive influence, influence you. So you do the things you do because you are not being forced to do it, because it's coming from, it's emanating from within. And that's what we call special influence. You have special influence on these people, inspiring them, thinking positive. Field Marshal Montgomery says infectious optimism. You infect the people you are working with optimism. That is the way to go. Everybody is happy working with you, and you are achieving the results that you need to achieve. You also are able to empower people so that they can do the job. It's only when they are unable to do something that you go there to supervise. But if you are there doing everything, you are afraid that people will come and do better than you are. I mean, your job as a leader is to ensure that you train people who are even better than you are. That's leadership, because you would leave one day and you ought to equip people with the skills to take over from you when you leave the scene. So you show the way and leave the way.
Great.
That's what leadership is about.
You know, with the picture you're painting here with regards to trying to familiarize and then restore confidence and also inspire joy in people to work with you. You know, there's also a caveat somewhere that links to contempt in terms of overfamiliarity and the accompanying contempt that comes with it, which is the result you want. How about that as well?
See, you are working with people, and you have to appreciate that there are two aspects. You have an institution, and you have, if it's a university, and you have the people.
Yeah.
And you have to draw the right balance, because you could lead in such a way that you would have people, but eventually you have no institution. But that's not leadership. You can also have the people without the institution. So you need the right balance. It doesn't mean that you are not a Father Christmas. You ought to be able to set expectations, set standards. And when people flout this, you sanction. So it's about that. And somebody has written jokingly, and I use that a lot, and it says that you ought to be both Moses and Joshua, because Moses was a politician and a lawyer, and inspired, you knew how he got water for the people. Mm. And there are people who then expect that anytime you need water, just go to your leader and you get it. But Joshua was not like that. Joshua was a military man. And I wasn't there, but he would say, I'm closing my eyes. I count 3. You ought to go and find shovels and axes and dig and find your own water. Mm. So you need the two. They are all leaders. Mm. Or you need to ensure that you are bringing benefits to your people. Mm.
That's interesting. Let's move to how we acquire leadership. Now, some say from day one I was born, I saw in him leadership. Some say I worked under leaders, I was trained, and with what I've been through, I can qualify to be a leader. What of these instances is the right yardstick for measuring leadership acquisition?
You know, you need the two. Mm-hmm. In the past, when people were looking for kings, they looked for wisdom, they looked for stature. You know, so simply you see Mr. Ajuman say, wow, look at the stature, look at him. He could be, he would be a leader, a good leader. And then you are taking through processes. But essentially, you need to develop whatever qualities you have. So you have to be trained. You have to ensure that even if you have the right attitudes, you go through the appropriate training for leadership. Mm. You know, this is why Jim Collins, for example, has 5-stage, process to becoming an executive leader. He says, you enter into the organization as an individual. Mm-hmm. So you go there with your attitude, right attitude, skill, and knowledge. So then you are admitted. When they are interviewing you, they look for these characteristics. Then when you go there, you now become a contributing member of the group. People appreciate that you are hardworking. Anything that the people are doing, you join. Then after a while, they see in you, this gentleman or lady could be a manager. So you are promoted to a managerial position. So what do you do as a manager? You ensure that you use resources efficiently to achieve predetermined goals. Your leaders would have envisioned. The leader has a vision. This is where we want to go. Your job as a manager is to operationalize that vision, to make it happen in every detail. Then you will do this job, ensuring compliance, efficiency, so well that they see in you some vision. So you are then elevated to a leadership position. Then what's your job as a leader? You have to envision, as I said, you envision and you craft a strategy to achieve that vision. You can inspire people, you can influence people positively. So you are a leader then. Then he talks about the final stage, which is the executive leader. Mm-hmm. And he says this is a paradoxical combination of professional will with humility. Mm. That you are so developed, you are so good that you are also humble. Mm. Professional will plus humility. Your humility must exceed your ability. So if you take Jim Collins, that's how he says you continue. In a similar way, Richard Daft also has 4 stages of leadership development.
Okay.
And he says the first, these are terms, unconscious incompetence. And you don't have leadership skills, and you are not practicing any leadership skills. So unconscious incompetence. So you go through education, training, and so on. You become aware of leadership skills, good presentation skills, visioning. You are aware of all that, but you are yet not practicing that. So you go to the third stage, which is conscious competence. So now you are familiar with leadership skills and you have opportunity to practice them. And how do you know that you are a leader? Anytime you go through a process, somebody calls you and says, that's great, this is good. You know, both superiors and subordinates recognize that. That is leadership. And then you go to the last stage. We say unconscious competence. You are so good. You now have become somebody, leadership has become part and parcel of you. So that's leadership. And that is the time that you are also humble. So leadership comes intuitively, effortlessly. Somebody calls it extra rational power, extra rationality. You don't even know how you answered a question. You don't even know how you solved a particular problem.
Great.
That's unconscious competence. So that's when leadership has become part and parcel of you. But remember that it just didn't happen, not happenstance, but through effort, through training, through practice, then you get there. So in all these cases, there is some effort, leading, some effort. And that's why we say that if you stop learning, you stop leading. So you constantly have to be updating your knowledge. And you have to have your self-confidence. And these come with the several efforts that you are making. So you have to go through those stages. The difference is that somebody will require a shorter period to go through this training. Others need longer period, but you must move, along the line.
Great.
So you become a leader. And you see, this is why we say that every leader is also a manager, because you would have gone through that. But not every manager is a leader, because you are yet to go through that.
Great. Great. So stay with us more for leadership challenges in African higher education after this short break. We'll be right back. Right back. Welcome back to AAU Talks on AAU TV as we inform, transform the voice of higher education in Africa. And we have here Dr. PaulEffah to discuss leadership challenges in African higher education. And before we went on the break, we were about to begin in the university setting proper. So now we've been able to now settle. Now let's look at university leadership by appointment and by election. Each of these approaches has an effect on how leadership cascades throughout the tenure. Which of these two, in your view, you believe has some sort of quality influence on leadership afterwards?
Thank you once again. In the past, a lot of the leaders were elected. You go, if it's a headship, if it's deanship, colleagues meet and elect one. Even the vice chancellor, it says first among equals, one of the colleagues, because they are all colleagues, it's a collegiate system. One of the colleagues is elected to become the provost, the vice chancellor, the president. Increasingly, the trend now has been that these positions, people are appointed to these positions. There have been some arguments that, if people are elected, they elect the one who is popular, but maybe not the very efficient person to run the show. So let's get a group to interview the people and pick the one who promises to be the best. So in recent times, the trend is to go appointment, that people are appointed. Universities Appointments and Promotions Board does that. And but you see, you have must have gone through a certain process, because they would say you must be a professor, a professorial material. You must have been the head of a department. You must have been a dean, a provost, before you do that. And increasingly, universities are also doing the search approach. Sometimes you have some people from within, some people from outside, like members of council 3 or 2, academic board 3 or 2, and the chairman from outside to do the appointment. Elsewhere, there is an executive search. The entire process is farmed out to a company, to somebody, to look at people dispassionately and make recommendations. So that's where the trend is moving towards now. The best practice is to have the appointments, get people, because they will enlist the criteria that they want. They will look at you, and these may be people who are outside, look at your referee's report, and a thorough process. I mean, I understand that even in some places, they will go as far as getting to your home and interviewing your spouse.
Interesting.
To see whether or not, because when you are appointed, a vice chancellor, it's not just you, it's your entire family they are appointing, and so on. So in the extreme, some people are doing that. So that is the trend now.
Great, great. Now, universities, don't have a one-size-fits-all structure. Some dynamism occurs in there, from universities that are beginning from scratch with less resources, and the ones with well-endowed in human resource capacities, all along differently. And one would think, well, perhaps we can just have a one-size-fits-all leadership system that fits all of these systems. In your view, do you find the need for there to be some specialized, unique leadership orientation or pattern for these universities across the region, basically?
There are some general knowledge that every leader in higher education must have. But we also note that there are differences in the universities. There are research-intensive universities, or those aspiring to be research-intensive universities, like the University of Ghana, KNUST, and the likes. We have comprehensive universities. Those universities, small universities, located in metropolitan areas and doing everything on diploma, degree, not necessarily getting to PhD, a few master's degrees. We have applied science and technology and technical universities, training people for industry. Hands-on development, training people for industry. We have entrepreneurial universities. We have developmental universities like the UDS that is enjoined to transform the Northern Savannah zone and rural areas in the country. So you appreciate that you need people with special knowledge of these types to be able to appreciate and understand the terrain where they are working, and to be able to envision and move towards the mandate that have been given to these universities. So it is important to always ensure that you have the right people. People are not the most important assets. The right people are. So says Jim Collins. So it's not just people.
The right people. And that cascades down to this issue of how then do we exert quality influence in terms of leadership in public and private institutions? Is there any kind of special ingredients that works in these two regimes or these disciplines? How does it work with a private institution? What is the orientation like? What is the pattern? What is the strategy like compared to the public? Are they the same? Are they diverse? Share with us.
The public university will have been set up for a particular reason. As for example, UDS has been set up for a particular reason, and it has a mandate. And is a public university in terms of resource allocation, at least government would pick all the salaries, be given some budgetary allocation to run the place. All of them, both private and public, must meet three characteristics. Somebody has said this is a global institution. I mentioned this the last time. They ought to be global, they ought to be national, and they ought to be local. Universities are meant to solve local problems. They must meet national aspirations. That's why they have been set up.
Yeah. And
they must be part of the global intellectual community. So whether you are public or private, you must belong, you must meet these three criteria. But the public in Africa tend to have a lot more resources to meet their respective mandates than most of private institutions that depend entirely. There are a few exceptions, but they depend entirely on the fees that are collected. And in recent times, even public universities have dwindling, and the number of dwindling resources, and the numbers are going down. And COVID has worsened it for the private university to the extent that some are even having some difficulty in meeting commitments in terms of payment of salaries and so on. So in terms of structure, in terms of resources, and in terms of the quality of the human resource, you will find that the public has an edge over the private. There are a few private institutions that stand up to the challenge, but generally you find that the public are doing better in terms of quality, in terms of ensuring that they have the right people and so on, more than the private. But we say that SDR is as good as gold. I mean, any products we are training must meet the international standard. The private, for example, focus on specific disciplines, while the public, the huge engineering, medical, and so on, very few private universities would go there. But if you take my university, for example, we pride ourselves that we have the best in fashion. We got accreditation to do fashion, the first at degree level first in this country. And then the graphic design and so on. So the public are able, the private are able to go into those areas where the public was not going in the past. Fashion, for example, even in the UK, it was only after 1985 that people in the universities began to pick this as a subject, as a discipline. But unlike the US, where you can teach anything. So in terms of flexibility, the private is a lot more flexible than the public. But in terms of resources, I would say I have been both worlds, and the public has a lot more resources. And again, in terms of interference, in terms of issues of ownership and that, the public institutions have been freed from that. The private has a lot more of those issues.
So though, let's take it also on this other note. You know, some recent observations have made the assertion that when you consider a private university, you know, looking at their predicaments with resource mobilization and the fact that they need to be breaking the markets and make themselves appealing to the job market, particularly in industry, they tend to have transactional leaders who are very fierce and bold compared to the public side, where, you know, the system is already laid down, government support, so there's no need to them to be so fierce and so unique I mean, you already have your nature scaffold already, and therefore you tend to have much more relaxed and not so, let me say, long-term vision-oriented leaders. This is the perception that the people have actually created about these two settings. What is your view on this session?
Well, you have to look at this question in context. The private university where you get your funding is tied to the student numbers. So you need to have a demand-driven program to have students coming, because if you don't have that, you fold up eventually. Yep. So you really need to chart uncharted paths. Ensure that you are working within the broad regulatory framework from GTEC, sure. To see how you go through the market to meet. You have to be ahead, to be resourceful, because there's competition from your own private universities, from the public universities, and now universities everywhere. You can have a university. Yeah. In addition to the distance programs from the public universities and so on. So in a private, I mean, you really have to work very hard to be part of the system. Otherwise, you have to fold up and go. Many of the private universities have folded up. The public, you also need to understand the public. Sometimes it is about dwindling resources and dwindling, I don't know whether you talk later about that challenge, but dwindling resources cuts across. In Africa, every year the money that public universities get is on the decline. So again, you also have to match up. This is why many of them are also going to areas that traditionally they would not have gone, but they have to survive. So it's an issue that we need to look at critically and ensure that the public universities have the resources to run, and then we can then ensure that they stick to their mandate. That otherwise they would also not survive. So to some extent, it's not the same, but I can tell you, because of the leadership by councils, by GTEC, because they will come to look at your programs. Yeah. You have to stay on top. You cannot just relax and say that, and you will be assessed and ranked, whether you like it or not. And you will find that the market now, recently, everybody is saying, I am number one. That is there. So you cannot rest, even though you are in the public. Both public and private have to work hard to ensure that you get that recognition in international ranking.
Let's take a look at how, at the point of assessment, who does well and who fails. What are the measures, the criteria for telling that you do well, you're not doing very well?
So every university has its mandate, aims of the university. So it is important that they are assessed by the mandate, by the aims that they have. If you are a research-intensive university, you ought to ensure that you have almost close to 80% of your faculty with terminal degrees, that you have 50% of your students in postgraduate studies. So they assess the quality of delivery and all that. So it is about the mandate that has been given to. It is a technical university, the research and development, what is happening on that, what are the products, so you ought to be able to stand tall in that before you look at, because every university, no matter what kind of university you are operating, to some extent, research is important. Traditionally, you add to existing knowledge. You advance the frontiers of knowledge. You teach and you provide service. So you'll be looking for the type of research that has been undertaken, citations and so on. If it's a technical university, you'll be looking at collaboration, the nature of collaboration between the university and industry. You'll be looking at what has been termed the triple helix: government, industry, university. What is the kind of relationship? How are they influencing industry? You know, if you are a technical university, there's a term that they use, valorized zeta. Valorized zeta is the one that adds value to. So they are expected to add value to industry. You know, that's the kind, so the skill development. So again, if you are a technical university, you would be assessed to extent to which you undertake research and development. The kinds in the past you would hear, the Tamale Technical University has developed a shear nut cracking machine. So you know that this is coming. The whole technical university has developed 15 recipes for the hospitality industry. So you look at the type of university and see what their mandate is and see what it is that they have been able to do. The quality of the academic staff, the quality of professional staff, the hybrid system online. Do you have the infrastructure for online and all that? So that's how you would be assessing the university. It need not just be the environment is important. People get there and they see the compound serene and so on. But critically, you have been set out to do something, to achieve something, and you will have to be assessed by that.
Great. You know, it's been great so far, but we're wrapping up with the term. You know, universities are facing challenges which we can categorize in 4 ways. I mean, you know that it's a volatile environment, it's quite uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. Irrespective of whatever the elements may be, it is still the VUCA environment you find yourself in. What is the appropriate reaction mindset to this very huge turmoil that we find on our campuses for leaders?
You know, let me just first broadly mention that universities all over Africa are facing financial difficulties. Everybody will appreciate that. The need for change, because as you mentioned, the uncertain world, and you will have to change. You have to lead change to survive in the VUCA world that you are talking about. Cost is rising. And we call it Baumol's cost disease, where we have increasing cost without corresponding increase in output. That is the kind of thing. We are in a type of industry, labor-intensive industry, and the cost is good. You need the people, and you ought to be ensuring that you also look within to see how you have prudent spending instead of just asking for more. It's also about that. And even the public support. Sometimes public support is waning because of some of the crises that we have. Difficulties here and there, ability to curb strikes, to deal with that kind of issue. Issues in Africa. How do you meet expectations of all the faculty, the staff, so that they would in turn give you the quality that you require? Somebody has called it upside down thinking. You start a business, says look at the people first and they will give you the profit. That is the upside down thinking. But again, you look at them alone, you might not have the university in the long run because it will not be there. So there is an urgent need, and this is where we talk about the reframed VUCA, urgent need for leaders to ensure that they really have a vision for the future. navigational leader. You know far, you know more, and you first to get it.
Yeah.
You know, so we need that kind of leadership to ensure that you still will stay within the future that you have set for yourself.
Yeah.
Understanding, you need to understand all the issues.
Sure.
Perfectly break the issues into fine components so you can then understand. You have to be courageous.
Yeah.
You move from one end to another so that you don't fall. You have to be courageous. Otherwise, you will stay where you are. You have to also be charting the uncharted path. Go to places that nobody else has gone. New programs here and there. Add. And this is why you need the leadership that will get cut through turbulence, because we are in that turbulent world. But you need that the person who will say staying calm will be able to sail through. We need to do this new knowledge, this new thing that we have to do. That kind of person to drive the process and be able to adapt.
Great.
Adapt to the changing circumstances. We cannot but be part of the changes that are going, and we will say have anticipatory thinking skills. Need to look far and anticipate, rehearse before the problems come. That's how we stay, because by the time the issues come, you already have thought about them, and you have some ideas about how you address, you call them the adaptive challenges as opposed to technical challenges, are those that we are familiar with.
Yeah.
But those that we need new skill set are the adaptive challenges. And that is the dilemma now.
You know, it's interesting when we discuss leadership with Dr. PaulEffah, because, you always want to hear more, but just where time permits us to wrap up on the leadership challenges in African higher education. These are a whole lot, a plethora of them, but the essence is not about wallowing in the challenges, but also seeing the way forward. And he just made it clear that amidst all of these hurdles, look at the vision, just don't live the vision. Have understanding of what is happening around you, be courageous to make decisions, and also be adaptable, because it comes for a time where you have to do that. Thank you very much, Dr. PaulEffah, for your time with us on AAU Talks and your contribution as well. You always contribute into leadership in African higher education. Thank you very much as well for your time with us on AAU Talks. I'm Ajaman Otrodako, bringing you AAU Talks as we inform and transform. Have a nice day, be safe, and bye.